A 65-year-old woman in Texas spent $4,000 on a brand new flower bed. Fresh soil, fresh mulch, fresh plants. 6 weeks later, Bermuda grass had crawled straight through her plastic edging and strangled half her garden. She wasn't lazy and she wasn't careless. She just didn't know the Bermuda grass roots can travel 6 to 8 inches underground in a single season and punch through almost every border sold at your local hardware store. Most gardeners think a border is a border. It is not. There is a massive difference between something that looks nice for a photo and something that can physically stop one of the most aggressive grasses on the planet. In this video, I'm breaking down 7 heavy-duty garden borders that gardeners across the country have actually tested against Bermuda grass. I'm going deep on how each one works, the materials you need, and the mistakes that let this grass sneak through anyway. Number 5 is the one most people skip because it looks too simple, and it ends up being the strongest option on this entire list. Before we get into number 1, Bermuda grass does not care how many videos you watch. It only cares whether you act on the right information at the right time. So hit that subscribe button now while it's fresh in your mind, and let's get into it. Item 1. Galvanized steel edging, buried deep. Galvanized steel is one of the only materials that can physically outmuscle a Bermuda rhizome. Unlike plastic or rubber, this metal does not flex or bend when the root pushes against it, which means the grass has nowhere to go but around. The key is depth. Most people bury steel edging 4 inches down and wonder why the grass still gets through. Bermuda roots regularly travel 6 to 8 inches underground, so anything shallower than that is basically decorative. The trick professional landscapers use is angling the steel slightly inward at the base, almost like a small underground lip. This forces any root that tries to tunnel under the edge to curve upward instead, which exposes it to air and usually kills the tip before it can surface inside your bed. Steel does rust over time, but that thin rust layer actually helps roots grip and die against the rough surface instead of finding a smooth path through. The surprising fact here is that steel edging becomes stronger against grass the older it gets, because the light surface rust creates texture that roots struggle to push past. Most people think rust is a downside. For this specific job, it's actually working in your favor. But steel alone still has one weakness that catches almost everyone off guard, and it has to do with what happens at the corners where 2 pieces meet. Quick question for you before we move to item 2. Have you already tried a border that completely failed against Bermuda grass? Type the material you used in the comments right now, because I genuinely read every single one and it helps me know what to break down in future videos. And if grass has ever destroyed something you worked hard to plant, you know exactly why hitting subscribe matters, because this channel exists to stop that from happening again. Item 2. Concrete curbing poured on site. Poured concrete curbing is the closest thing to a permanent wall you can put around a garden bed. Unlike interlocking pavers or precast blocks, a poured curb has 0 seams for the first several feet, which means there's no obvious gap for a rhizome to slip through. Homeowners who pour their own curbing using a rental curbing machine typically go at least 6 inches deep and 4 inches wide, which is more than enough to stop almost any Bermuda root cold. The part people underestimate is curing time. Concrete needs close to a month to reach full strength, and Bermuda grass is opportunistic enough to push into curing concrete if the bed next to it is left untouched during that window. Smart gardeners lay a temporary root barrier fabric along the inside edge during the curing period, specifically to buy time until the concrete fully hardens. Here's something almost nobody talks about. Concrete curving actually gets more effective in hot climates, because the heat causes the surface to become slightly harder and more brittle at the very top layer, which makes it even tougher for a root tip to gain purchase. Once that curb is in place, though, there's still one sneaky way Bermuda grass gets past even solid concrete, and it has nothing to do with the ground at all. Item 3. Vertical root barrier fabric installed deep. This is the option most people have never even heard of. Root barrier fabric isn't the thin landscape fabric you roll out under mulch. It's a thick woven polypropylene material specifically engineered to block rhizomes while still letting water drain through. Installed vertically along the edge of a bed at a depth of 10 to 12 inches, this fabric creates an underground wall that Bermuda grass genuinely struggles to penetrate. What makes this method so effective is that it works with any surface border you already have. You can pair root barrier fabric with wood, plastic, or stone edging on top, and the fabric does the real work underground. while the visible border just holds everything in place. Contractors who install this professionally usually fold the top 2 inches outward in an L shape, which stops any rhizomes that tries to travel along the surface instead of underground. The surprising fact most people miss is that Bermuda grass rhizomes actually change direction when they hit this fabric instead of stopping completely. They'll often curve sideways and try to find the end of the barrier, which is exactly why the fabric needs to extend well past the corners of your bed and not just along the straight edges. Item 4 takes this same underground concept and pushes it even further using something you'd never expect to see in a garden.
Item 4. Buried hardware cloth combined with edging. Hardware cloth is the heavy welded wire mesh usually used to keep rodents out of gardens, but a growing number of gardeners are using it as a secondary defense against Bermuda grass. When buried flat underground just beneath a standard border, it forces any root trying to tunnel under the edge to grow through incredibly tight metal openings, which most rhizomes simply cannot manage. This method works best as a backup layer rather than a standalone border. Gardeners lay a strip of hardware cloth roughly 12 inches wide horizontally underground, right where the border meets the bed, then install their visible edging directly on top. The horizontal placement is what makes this different from steel or fabric because it blocks roots trying to grow underneath the border rather than through it. The fact that surprises people most is that half-inch hardware cloth is actually more effective than quarter-inch for this specific job. Slightly larger gaps let roots partially enter the mesh, where they then get physically trapped and can't push forward or pull back, which essentially kills that section of the rhizome. But mesh and fabric only handle what's happening below the surface. Item 5 deals with something almost every single gardener completely ignores. Item 5. Deep mowed grass moat around the bed. This is the option I mentioned earlier that looks far too simple to actually work. A grass moat is a strip of lawn roughly 18 to 24 inches wide around your garden bed that you mow extremely short on a consistent weekly schedule. Bermuda grass spreads primarily through above-ground runners called stolons, and those runners need length and height to establish new root points. By keeping this border strip cut short and constantly disturbed, you're physically preventing stolons from ever touching down and rooting. Combined with any of the underground barriers already mentioned, this creates a 2-layer defense system where the underground barrier stops rhizomes and the mowed moat stops surface runners. Gardeners who use this method report cutting their Bermuda invasion problems by more than half without spending a single extra dollar. Here's the surprising part almost nobody knows. Regularly mowed Bermuda grass actually grows shallower roots over time because constant top removal forces the plant to spend its energy on regrowth instead of deep root expansion, which makes it noticeably easier to control the longer you maintain this habit. There's one more layer to this defense system though, and it lives entirely below your feet. Before item 6, let me ask you something directly. Do you currently have a mowed strip or barrier around your beds, or is your border sitting right up against open lawn? Be honest in the comments because a lot of people don't realize how much that gap matters until Bermuda grass has already crossed it. And if this video has been useful so far, hitting like right now genuinely helps this reach other gardeners dealing with the exact same invasive grass problem you are. Item 6. Deep-set masonry block walls. Masonry block borders built with mortar rather than simply stacked create one of the most Bermuda-resistant structures available to home gardeners. Unlike dry stacked stone, where roots can find their way through tiny gaps, mortared block walls seal every seam completely. Most successful installations go at least 8 inches into the ground, with the footer poured slightly wider than the wall itself to prevent roots from simply going around the base. The reason this outperforms most other options on this list is stability over time. Wood rots, plastic warps, and even steel can shift slightly with freeze-thaw cycles. But a properly mortared block wall stays essentially unchanged for decades. That long-term stability means there are no new gaps forming years down the road for grass to eventually discover. The detail that surprises most people is that the mortar joints themselves become the weak point almost every time this method fails. Bermuda grass doesn't beat the blocks. It finds a single hairline crack in aging mortar and exploits that one spot relentlessly, which is why annual mortar inspection matters more than the initial installation quality. Every method so far has focused on stopping Bermuda grass from the outside. Item 7 flips that entire approach completely. Item 7. Combined layered defense system. The single most effective approach isn't any individual border on this list, it's combining them. Gardeners who see the best long-term results typically layer a vertical root barrier fabric buried 12 inches deep with a solid surface border like steel or masonry on top, and finish with a mowed grass moat on the outside edge. Each layer catches what the previous layer might miss. This layered method mirrors exactly how professional sports fields and golf courses manage Bermuda grass along their edges. Because those facilities cannot afford a single failure point, they combined underground barriers with mowed buffer zones and hard edging specifically because relying on just one method has a documented failure rate even with professional installation and maintenance. The most shocking fact of this entire video is this: even the strongest single barrier on this list will eventually fail on its own given enough time, because Bermuda grass is genuinely one of the most persistent plants in North America. Layering methods together isn't overkill. Based on what actual gardeners and professionals report, it's the only approach that holds up long-term. Here's the pattern running through every single item on this list. Bermuda grass doesn't get stopped by looks. It gets stopped by depth, by materials that don't bend or crack, and by consistent maintenance that never gives the grass a moment to find a weak point. Every border we covered today works the same way. It removes one specific pathway the grass could use to spread. Steel removes lateral movement. Concrete removes seams. Fabric and mesh remove underground tunneling. A mowed moat removes surface runners. And layering all of it together removes the single points of failure that let this grass win in the first place. Once you see it that way, you stop thinking about borders as decoration and start thinking about them as a system. If you want to see exactly what to do when Bermuda grass has already gotten inside your garden bed, my next video walks through the full removal and recovery process step by step, and you genuinely don't want to miss it. Make sure you're subscribed so it shows up the moment it goes live. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I put a lot of time into making sure every single fact in this video actually holds up in real gardens and not just in theory. Go take care of that garden, and I'll see you in the next one.